For RCR TV, I'm Sean Kinney, and welcome to HetNet Happenings, where we take a look at all things DAS, Wi-Fi, small cell, and much more.
CommScope, thinking beyond today's technology to help you make the best decision for your network and your business. Telecom Careers, the #1 global telecom and wireless job board, telecomcareers.com. Register today for the Wireless Infrastructure Show, the premier national event for mobile network solutions, produced for the industry, by the industry.
Welcome back to HetNet Happenings. We're joined in the studio today by the folks from AWS Communications, located right here in Austin, Texas. We've got the CEO of the company, Bobby Mack, joining us, and then we've got Dean Vinson. Dean, you're the VP of Operations and Emerging Technologies. So if we could start by Bobby telling us a little bit about your background in the industry and just a little bit about what services AWS Communications offers.
My background really in communications started back in the early 90s from just the ISP space, dial-up internet provider, and was an early adopter. Certainly think I was an early adopter of wireless in 98, 99. I was in a rural area where there was no broadband offering. There was ISDN was just coming into town. So we were in that early space where we took wireless, indoor wireless, and forced it outdoors. It was kind of an interesting time then because we were mavericks out there taking Walmart ice chests and putting radios at the bottom of building rooftops and grain silos and things like that. But that was the only option for broadband in the rural space anyway. And that developed building up, so mainly from the microwave and broadband space. I got involved with AWS Communications, came in as CEO a couple of years ago, and our founder and Chief Operating Officer Mike Huerta started the company in 2002 in Central Texas, and was also from the microwave broadband space. He'd done some AT&T microwave large wide area networks, and we have been, for the last couple of years, been working into the DAS vertical. It seemed to be a good fit. Our company also does structured cabling and fiber optics and things like that. So it was a good fit for us being from that RF space, understanding the RF side as well as the indoor cabling side. DAS was a good fit, and frankly, I find it exciting. To me, for us, it's a bit of an emerging technology in the central part of the U.S. Anyway. It's not as prevalent as it is maybe on the east and west. So I look at it just about as exciting as it was in those early days of Wi-Fi, of outdoor Wi-Fi.
All right.
Just indoor DAS.
And Bobby, you're the guy that rolls your sleeves up and gets your hands dirty out on the operations side.
This is Dean.
Dean, sorry, Dean Vinson. I apologize. And then, so just give me an idea of what some of your responsibilities with AWS are.
Yeah, I came on board actually relatively recently from the West Coast. Have an extensive DAS, indoor and outdoor DAS experience. Primarily responsible in working specifically with Sprint and their macro sites, keeping them updated and commissioning, so on and so forth. And Bobby and found me. Actually, I found him as well. And we actually moved our family here recently to be able to complete a need that I saw very prevalent here in Central Texas. Regarding the lack of DAS and public safety. So my primary responsibilities as Vice President of Operations is to make sure that our crew is efficiently, effectively doing what they need to do with great efficiency and time and utmost safety. Safety is our, of course, first and primary goal as we build up our productivity and working with large contractors. We need to fit standards. Secondly, the emerging technologies is the DAS foundation of my experience in implementing that into what has already been built through AWS, extending that outdoor and in macro site experience indoors, and training those who are new building owners, new contractors building here in Central Texas and beyond, giving them the need, understanding the need that they are going to have a problem if they don't recognize the fact that their cell phone or data is not going to work with these new new structures that are coming out, new glass and building structures.
Yeah, these distributed antenna systems, really hot topic. I think at least 3 times a week I'm writing a story about upgrades at stadiums or convention centers or hotels, spaces like this. Bobby, you mentioned you guys are moving into that vertical. How do you sort of get that going? I know you've got the expertise now, so what's the sort of the next step to developing that?
Yeah, for us is we have a significant staff with some experience in, as I said, microwave, broadband, wireless, and structured cabling in general, fiber optic, et cetera. And so we've done some significant training and certifications of our staff with some of the DAS equipment, so we're ready for installations and more ready for installations and commissioning, that sort of thing. But so what we see as a low-hanging fruit for us, as Dean had mentioned, there's not a lot of integrators in the central section of the U.S. From our experience, it appears that a lot of these guys are flying in crews from East Coast, West Coast to do some of the DAS deployments that are becoming more prevalent here in the state of Texas anyway. And we make ourselves available to them for subcontracting for some of the testing, some of the RF testing, certainly the installation and commissioning. And we're also going after some of our own. We've been approached by some building owners because we have relationships with a lot of general contractors. So,
all right. And then, Dean, in your experience with these indoor and outdoor distributed antenna systems, just sort of give me a big picture idea of what is, from a deployment standpoint, an engineering standpoint, what's the hallmark of a really successful deployment? And then also, what are some of the challenges that you encounter in the field when you're dropping these systems?
Absolutely, and there are several too. And the experience really is the only way to really learn and discover what is needed to deploy a successful DAS. There are there's an active and a passive DAS deployment that are available. The active DAS is more for the 150,000 plus square foot large high-rise buildings, and that's a fiber DAS system. That's something that is much heavily more monitored, easier to maintain, much more reliable, less loss, dB loss, and you can get high wattage outputs into several vendors that provide it. Some of the problems that we see, and one of the big problems that we see right now is PIM, that's passive intermodulation. That's something that is really starting to take the industry, put them on the back burner almost, and make sure that they really pay attention to it. Something that's been around for a long time but has been ignored. And now that they're seeing that need, the major suppliers, Verizon, Sprint, no longer Nextel, Sprint, T-Mobile, AT&T, they all are actually stepping up their game and requiring much higher power PIM readings. And so that also keeps us accountable as not only a distributor but an integrator. Holds us accountable to a higher standard of commissioning and installation as well. So that's one of the other problems. The other problem that I see very prevalent is the lack of attention to public safety, first responders. Public safety 700, 800 is been around for a long time. It is pretty well used. VHF, UHF, the ultra low band, 150 to 450, not quite so much. Yet the need is absolutely there, and we, as AWS, we're here to make sure that we let people know, the contractors, prime contractors, as well as the building owners, that since 9/11, since Oklahoma City bombings, there's been some major headway needed to take place in order to provide that. So we're here to educating building owners on that need.
If I could go a little further into that, there are several parts of the country where it's required to have public safety DAS systems in buildings over X size, over 5 stories, that sort of thing. And as Dean said, primarily since the 9/11 and the first responder issues in there, we're not seeing that in great areas of the U.S. And so what we see as a niche we want to go after is educating the building owners and the municipalities of the importance of first responders connectivity inside buildings. And that also goes into the cell phone space as well. If somebody's having a heart attack in a 5-story building or 10-story building and they can't call 911, that's a real issue. So this is emerging, and I see that driving the DAS market even further. The DAS market has gotten some good traction over the last 5 or 6 years, but I think it's really going to ramp up based on the public safety requirements.
Yeah, and just to sort of, break that down for the end user, we kind of touched on two dramatically different use cases. One of them, this sort of like a big stadium in-building DAS that makes you able to, stay connected while you're in a very crowded space. And then you mentioned the public safety issue. I think it's wasted on a lot of people that when you're making a 911 call from inside a large crowded building, it gets tough on the operator end to locate where you are. And that's what a DAS will do.
Be even able to make
even
that call.
even to reach them. Yeah, you're right. All right, so then I want to circle back a little bit. You mentioned that some of your team members have DAS certifications. Can you give us an idea of what kind of certification you're talking about?
We just did a certification training for our staff recently with a company named ADRF, which those in the DAS space have heard that. Dean carries some certifications with him. If I could correct me if I'm wrong here, but he's been certified in solid and mobile access and Corning as well. So he's got a variety of experience and understanding of the different platforms. I will say that what I've seen in the last few months, anyway, is that or perhaps the last year, there's a lot of new players getting into the market. We were recently at IB Tough, the In-Building Users Technology Forum here in Austin a few weeks ago, and there were a lot. From my viewpoint, there seemed to be a lot of new players in that technology market that are doing full turnkey systems from end to end in a DAS system. Some of those were people who had been making components in the past and now are doing their entire DAS platform. ADRF is a good example of that. They used to make just BDAs and some of the smaller components. Now they have for the last couple of years, they have an entire end-to-end DAS system. So it's important to us that there's two things that are happening. As these new vendors and new manufacturers come on the market, it's important that we hold those certifications so we can be neutral depending on what kind of equipment we want to integrate. But it also is going to help the business owners and the architects, and this will drive the price down to those pieces of equipment, similar to the way it did in the wireless broadband market. As more players got in, the cost came down and lowers the barriers to entry.
And you mentioned the in-building conference a few weeks ago here in Austin. There was also another big DAS-oriented show a few weeks ago up in Dallas. That's the Tesco One Innovation Showcase. We had a few RCR folks up there for the show. Bobby, I don't think you got to go, but Dean, you got to go, right?
I did, yeah.
So what sort of is the big takeaway you got from getting to, meet with all of the different vendors and look at sort of the new technology?
Yeah, thank you. It was actually it was an impressive show, a little bit smaller than I anticipated. Coming from IB Tough, it was a little bit different, but very, very encouraging to be there. As a neutral system, we didn't have specific vendor DAS. It wasn't DAS critical. It's more of a vendor approach. Really got to meet a lot of the high-end, new high-end products that are coming up, being available on the market with 3M and some of the other manufacturers. Also, the takeaway that I got was being able to actually walk through the DAS. They have about a 60-sector system in their stadium, spending more than, I believe, is about $60 million on their DAS over a 2-phase, and extending as the technology is starting to converge and upgrade and update. They've got quite an extensive MIMO DAS system, several sectors like I mentioned, and it's completely neutral host and owned and operated by the center themselves. So a lot of issues that they've been having to deal with. Of course, having a MIMO system as opposed to a SISO system is absolutely very desirable to them, and seeing reflection issues. Obviously, you have so much metal and so many other things that are moving components with a large amount of users. They had quite a challenge, but I was very impressed with what they've done to be able to keep up to date. One example, if I can share it with you, was their idea of putting this enormously large screen in the middle of the stadium, something that they really take pride on. And around this screen is speakers and lights and devices. And this screen goes up and down. Now they do have a system that goes around to provide coverage inside the stadium. So during special events, they would lower this down, and when they lowered it, they created so much reflection in the system that carriers would actually have to stop what they're doing, come out and make their adjustments, almost recommission their system because they lowered it 10 feet. And they couldn't get coverage from one side or the other.
Okay.
So it was actually quite an intense of a process they need to go through. As they lowered it, they had all the carriers come in, all of the integrators come in and make the adjustments needed to provide service, as AT&T and Verizon have very high standards, as well as T-Mobile and others, that they need to provide the best coverage possible. So and then, of course, when that event was over, whether it be a concert or a rodeo, they would raise that back up, scrambling everybody to get in for the next event. So it was very, very impressive, not only from that, but also from the aesthetic standpoint. They put several hundreds of thousands of dollars to
It's
to
invisible.
cover up. It's
Yeah.
literally invisible.
Stealth
Absolutely.
antennas.
They had a lot of carbon fiber and fiberglass coverings that they put over the antennas and the remotes in the field, where you virtually really had to look for them to be able to find them. So very, very impressive system that they did. And they did a very quick turnaround and spent more money than probably any of us will ever see in a lifetime.
And I'll put in a shameless plug here for our RCR YouTube channel. We've got a lot of video that our editor Joey Jackson took from the Tesco show. So anybody who wants to get an idea of what this DAS actually looks like, to the extent that you can see it, you can check out those videos on YouTube. So we've talked about DAS and boosting cellular indoors. Let's talk about in-building Wi-Fi now. Bobby, I know you guys have done a lot of work in that space. If you could just give us an idea of the type of services AWS offers for customers looking to, deploy an in-building Wi-Fi solution.
Yeah, in-building Wi-Fi has been, well, just Wi-Fi in general and broadband wireless has been certainly the bread and butter for AWS for a long time. And that's the space that our COO, Mike Huerta, and founder, and myself come from. So we have quite a bit of experience as that technology has evolved and matured over the last almost 20 years now of stadiums, as well as the hospitality space, large hotels and large buildings. Currently, AWS has trimmed that back a little bit, and we're going after more of the vertical market of DAS and some of the emerging LAN technologies. Passive optical networking is very big for our company now, but we still do Wi-Fi, do wireless in a couple of different ways. We do the microwave wireless in large wide area networks for banks and universities. The Wi-Fi nowadays that AWS specializes in is more special event, outdoor fairs, outdoor events. The big festival here in Austin, South by Southwest, will be very busy during that for temporary Wi-Fi for when MTV comes to town and wants to do, streaming concerts, then they need some good connectivity. So the Wi-Fi we do nowadays, although we do have clients that do hotels, et cetera, we're doing more special events and temporary Wi-Fi and more specialized networks.
Okay, well, let me ask you, based on years of experience doing these in-buildings, compare and contrast the process you go through when you're deploying in new construction versus a retrofit. I got to imagine new construction is significantly more straightforward than a retrofit.
Yeah, it's an easier workspace. Obviously, it's not quite dealing with tenants and building occupants. So obviously, it's much easier. A lot of that goes without saying. The walls are open, so you can cable your pathways. We do a lot of both. Now, retrofits are challenging, and there's some new products. In fact, 3M makes a new product with fiber that can be run along the molding to retrofit a building without having to find a new pathway. We've got a real unique kind of adhesive-backed, as you can imagine, it's 3M, so I've got an adhesive-backed channel with fiber already in it.
Okay.
So that helps with some of the fiber networking on the retrofit. As that applies to DAS, again, this kind of circles back to that topic. We're finding a lot, certainly in the areas where DAS is just getting more of a hold. The building owners are coming to us for retrofits. They've not budgeted DAS. There's a couple we're working with right now in the state of Texas where they've not budgeted for DAS. They've built these large buildings. They put up their energy efficient reflective glass on the skin, and suddenly the cell phone signals go away. So we have a couple of buildings we're dealing with right now that force them into a retrofit. They're in a bit of a panic. One in particular is a high-end residential condo space, high-rise condos, and they're really going for the executives and the university professors and those kind of folks, and they can't rent to them if they can't get good cell service. So they're forced into the retrofit, and that becomes its own challenge. We're having defined pathways. In one particular building, they'll have to cut access holes so we can get up in the ceiling and mount the antennas. So it's significantly more challenging, and it virtually doubles the cost from a labor perspective.
Yeah, I think you really hit on something there. Is building owners, not yet at least, don't seem to across the board be budgeting for this stuff. It occurs to them almost instantly once the building's up, but it wasn't there on the front end, so it's a challenge. And I think eventually I got to think within a year or two this is going to be de rigueur for new construction. You got to have your line item in there for your in-building setup.
Right.
All right, and you mentioned special event Wi-Fi. I want to talk a little bit about this. You and I were chatting a week or two ago, and I was recalling being at the Austin City Limits Music Festival out there in Zilker Park, and then trying to get on a Wi-Fi network. There must have been 100, 200 of them set up temporarily just in this, I think, 75-acre field. How do you do that?
Well, the challenges there are when you get too many networks, there's only so many open channels you can deal with. So there's a lot of interference. Hopefully you coordinate with a lot of the other vendors. What you saw at the ACL Festival, you mentioned, is each of these entities, whether it's a promotional company or a record company or some retail company that wants to advertise their product, they're setting up their own network. So it does become a challenge. And frankly, it can almost turn into amplifier wars. Who can have the cleanest and the strongest signal? Now, there are rules, and FCC regulates the power settings, which are followed to some degree in those instances, but also they're not walking around shutting people down for too much power. So it does get to be a challenge, but if it's designed well and you have solid equipment, by solid I mean good quality equipment, then
Not a pitch.
yeah, that wasn't a pitch by any means. But if you have good quality equipment and it's designed well, and you set it up for capacity of the anticipated users, then you can get past some of that.
Yeah. So in an ideal deployment case for outdoor Wi-Fi, what sort of speed could the end user expect to see?
Well, it's all over the map.
Yeah.
From my experience, 5 to 10 megabits is about all you're going to get consistently, or all you can promise. That's typically about all we'll want to promise someone.
Okay.
Now, in the examples I use, like MTV coming to town and wanting to stream a concert, that's more of a dedicated link.
Right.
Where we'll have dedicated bandwidth to a dedicated 100 square foot area. So it's a lot easier to give them 20, 30, 40 megabits of uplink. But in the open environment, like the festival you mentioned, 1 to 10 megabits is all you're going to see, even if you're using 50 megabit radios.
And just to give people some perspective on that, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, about 2.5 megabits is what it takes to stream a video.
About that,
Okay.
yeah. Any less than that, you're going to be choppy and buffering.
Okay. Well, and then, I wanted to sort of wrap the show up by talking with you guys about what trends you're kind of watching from a field enterprise perspective. What do you expect customers to want in 2015, and is that going to be the same thing that they want in 2016?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I'd like to actually touch on that. That's
Please.
actually being a forward-thinking company that AWS is. We've really put our boots to the ground to be sure that we're looking forward to what is going to be happening, being integrating new technologies from the carriers, faster speeds, but also we're taking a big pride, taking a step and putting pride into educating, like you had mentioned, educating people, building owners, contractors, making sure they understand the need, that they can plan and budget accordingly for what their needs are. So I think, moving forward that way, I think that's very, very important for us as a company to be able to be there, to be their eyes and ears, to inform them of what they may not be aware of. And then as that comes, also huge public safety. We've actually met with fire marshals. We met with folks who we're trying to make sure we see their need, their real needs. How many lives do we need to lose because they can't communicate to dispatch or with each other? So, putting that personal care, I think, is very, very important to us. We need to be more than making a dollar. We need to be about changing lives, and I think that's going to be a big opportunity for us in 2015 and 2016. So,
Dean, that's an excellent point. And guys, maybe we can have you back in a few months and we can talk more about these kind of things. But in the meantime, Bobby, Dean, I really want to thank you guys for coming in. For the folks at home, I want to thank you for watching HetNet Happenings.